Sakura Haruka is a high school student who lives life the way he wants to, but is shunned by his peers in school as a result. Early one morning, a woman is being hassled by a group of guys who have already peaked in life. She's got a carton full of eggs, so she's obviously got places to be, but these guys don't care and keep asking her to come have some fun with them. She refuses and tells the leader that she would smash her eggs into his face if it wouldn't be incredibly wasteful, but she has no time to waste on lowlives like him and his friends, so she will be leaving now. The leader doesn't know how to take no for an answer, so he forcefully grabs her hand, hurting her in the process, which is when Sakura intervenes. At first, he tries to be civil and handle the situation like a reasonable person, so he tells the leader of the boys to pack it up because it's too early in the morning to be doing dumb stuff like this. Unfortunately, logical reasoning doesn't work when your brain is the size of a walnut, so the leader tries to swing on Sakura, only to get his punch cleanly dodged. He then proceeds to get beaten up so bad that the cameraman had to cut away, but once he is back in frame, Sakura is standing over him, calling him and his friends weak. He's not scared of a fight, so if anyone has a problem with him, it should remember that his name is Sakura Haruka from Furin High. Afterwards, he simply begins walking away without saying a word to complete his badass moment, but the girl who had been watching everything happen the whole time finally snaps out of her daze and chases after him. She grabs a hold of his arm and thanks him for saving her, but Sakura is confused because no one has ever thanked him for anything before. His brain short-circuits, so he instantly goes into tsundere mode as he tells her that he didn't do it for her sake or anything. He just got pissed off by the way the guy was acting. The girl ignores his outburst and asks if he is hungry by any chance, which Sakura initially denies, but no one can turn down a good omelette, so he ends up at the girl's restaurant. While making small talk, she realizes that Sakura isn't originally from this town, which explains why she hasn't seen him around before. Recently, there have been a lot of gangs fighting in the area, so normal people tend to steer clear of the area. She introduces herself as Tachibana, but Sakura is still trying to figure out why this girl is being so friendly to him. Most people would be afraid of someone who they saw take on 5 guys easily, but she doesn't seem to care at all. She asks if he's not going to eat the food she made for him since he hasn't taken a bite yet, so Sakura immediately starts eating and he loves it. As he eats, Tachibana comments on how unique he looks since half his face is colored different, but she can tell that it's just the way he looks naturally. Her face gets a little too close, so Sakura freaks out and jumps back. After calming down a bit, Sakura says he's surprised that she doesn't find him weird since most people would call him gross for the way he looked. Tachibana doesn't find his appearance all that strange since she is used to seeing people with much worse fashion choices. But that aside, she asks if his appearance has anything to do with the reason he came here in the first place. Sakura tells her she's right since he came here because the way he looks doesn't matter when it comes to a fight. Furin is notorious for having the most brain-dead students but also the best fighters, so brawls take place every day to decide who's on top. Sakura isn't excluded from the Walnut Brain Society, so a school like this is the only place that he's got a shot at making a name for himself. Tachibana now understands Sakura's motivations, but that doesn't stop her from making fun of him for being so excited for school that he wore his uniform today when Furin doesn't open until tomorrow. Sakura denies it, but his embarrassment only tells Tachibana that she's right about him. While they were bickering, an old man named Yama had just finished his meal and is heading out. But just before he leaves, Sakura notices that he left his bag behind, so he gets his attention and hands it back to him. A little while later, Tachibana comes over and says Yama was thankful for Sakura's help, so he wanted her to give him some candy as a sign of gratitude. Sakura still isn't used to being thanked for anything, so he asks why the people here are being so nice to him. Normally, people would take one look at him and think he is a delinquent, so they'd be on guard. One time, he tried to return someone's wallet, but he got the cops called on him because the person accused him of stealing it. Tachibana tells Sakura that he made the right choice coming to Fujin, but as he is now, there is no way he's beating anyone, let alone becoming the top dog, and that all because of one thing. He may be strong, but he is alone, so he's gonna get his ass jumped. Hearing her say he's alone strikes a nerve with Sakura, so he angrily states that he is not weak, so there's no reason for him to rely on other people just to win a fight. She admits that Sakura may have the strength to back up his claim, but it would be best if he goes to meet some other kids from Furin, then he will understand what she means. While walking home, Sakura finds himself confronted by the gang leader from earlier, and this time he has brought the entire squad for the sole purpose of jumping Sakura. He isn't really in the mood to deal with this right now, so he just tries to ignore them and walk away, but the leader stops him just to start making fun of the way he looks. honestly, this is what Sakura was waiting for, since this jerk is the kind of person he has been dealing with his entire life. They always look at him with disgust, so he has given up on trying to fit in. People just make assumptions based on what he looks like, so if the world wants him to be a delinquent, he's going to do just that. He punches the leader straight in the face once more and proceeds to take on the entire gang all at once, and he's actually winning. They keep coming after him, but even though some of them are armed with bats, he continues to avoid their attacks and single-handedly drop the average IQ score among the gang members with the brain damage he's inflicting. While all this is going on, Tachibana was inside her store cleaning up the dishes, and while I've got nothing against her, this dumbass decided it was a good idea to go outside and check what's going on. Well, she gets grabbed and held at knife point so they can use her as a hostage to get Sakura to let his guard down. However, as soon as Sakura sees Tachibana in danger, he pulls off some cool acrobatics and drops the guy before he ever had the chance to use his knife. One guy tries to sneak up behind Sakura, but he's not going to call for something as cheap as that and roundhouse kicks the guy's face into a wall. He continues beating them down, but having to protect Tachibana is really limiting the amount of damage he can do, and if this keeps up, he's going to get overrun. He doesn't even know why he bothered helping her in the first place, since he barely knows her. As he continues fighting, one of the guys he had knocked out before regains consciousness and grabs the knife that had been thrown to the floor, slashes Sakura's ankle. He then almost gets his head smashed in by a guy with a bat, but he manages to stay back at the last moment, although with his injured ankle, his mobility is going to be limited. He has no chance of evading the next attack, so he just braces himself for the inevitable beating he's going to get. However, before the bat can make him even dumber than he was before, he gets saved by a guy who was also wearing the same Furin uniform as him. The guy thanks Sakura for protecting Tachibana, and she looks happy to see him. He asked her not to tell their boss that she was in danger so he doesn't flip out, but now that he is here, he'll make sure the situation gets handled. He grabs the bat from the gang member and elbows High-Face so hard that he gets put down for a compulsory nap, after which he then turns to the rest of the people there as his friends arrive. These punks have made a mess of the town with their antics, so they are going to have to pay for it. The gang is understandably scared since they were already barely winning against one guy, but now they've got to deal with 4 more. There's no backing out at this point, so they all attack at once even though they know they got no chance at winning. All the Furin guys are just as tough as Sakura, so this fight is a one-sided beating. One guy tries to go after Sakura, and since his ankle is injured, he's not able to get out of the way in time. Luckily, Hiraji steps in and kicks the guy into a wall. He tells Sakura to stand back if he is hurt, since they won't be able to protect him if he gets himself caught in the middle, and Sakura just remains dumbfounded as people begin to cheer for the Furin guys to beat up the gang so they can get on with their days. This is nothing like what Sakura was expecting when he came here, and he never would have thought that the people here would be so supportive of Furin. Tachibana then explains to him that when she said gang make this place unsafe, that it only applies up until about 2 years ago. This was because of the students at Furin High who took the town's security upon themselves and put up a notice board at the entrance. Anyone dumb enough to cause trouble in their town will leave the town with more brain damage than they started with because they are the town's shield, otherwise known as Windbreaker. That's why the townspeople love them so much now. It's true that they were a bunch of lowlives 2 years ago, but that was 2 years ago, and now they are loved by everyone here. Sakura can't help but feel jealous that despite fighting like that, these guys are still accepted by everyone here as though they are heroes when all he ever got was scorn. He is still in shock when the townspeople turn their attention to him and start thanking him for holding off the gang until everyone else arrived. Since his ankle is hurt, an old lady offers to give him some first aid, but all this kindness is too much for him to process, so he has another outburst. Tachibana understands why he is acting this way, so she takes over the first aid for him and says that she can tell that he is alone, but he didn't choose to be alone. Whatever circumstances may have caused it, he doesn't need to give up on the people here because they need him. He was still kind enough to return Yema's bag, and he even put himself at risk to save her. So if he is willing to look towards them, then they won't turn their backs on him. Sakura doesn't know how to respond, so instead he takes off running towards the crowd and proceeds to jump 10 feet into the air. He transitions into a drop kick aimed at the gang leader who is trying to sneak up on Hiraji, and while he's not sure how he feels about this whole playing hero thing, but if people will accept him the way he is, then he will fight to defend the town. The next day, Sakura arrives at the diner, but he's got a foul look on his face because he was coaxed into giving a piggyback ride to a granny. Since they've arrived, Sakura tells the granny to get off his back already, because he's not above slugging the grandma in the face, so Granny Sayo jumps off his back and Sakura realizes she tricked him more than he thought. She had told him her hips hurt so bad that she could barely walk at all. But all of a sudden, she's able to move perfectly fine and doesn't even acknowledge it when Sakura tries to call her out on it, making him even more angry. However, despite the granny's jokes, she's still grateful to Sakura for helping her get to the diner this morning, so she thanks him. Sakura still isn't used to being thanked for things, so he starts blushing once again and wants to leave to save himself some embarrassment, but before he can go, Tachibana calls him back because she's got something special just for him. She offers him a full breakfast, free of charge, since his entrance ceremony to Furin is going to happen today, but now that she thinks about it, the ceremony doesn't start until 12, but Sakura is already dressed for it, and it's only 10 o'clock. This gives her perfect ammunition to start teasing Sakura some more for being excited about attending Furin, but he denies it and says he was just out for a walk today. Tachibana doesn't blame him for being excited, though, since she knows there are a lot of interesting people there for Sakura to meet, but moments later the front door swings wide open and Naraya walks in, or rather faceplants into the room. After picking himself off the floor, he shows everyone his brand new Furin uniform, but Sakura points out that he forgot to take the tags off clothes. Naraya then proceeds to roll around on the ground in an attempt to get the tags off his back, and Sakura can't believe a guy as clumsy as him is going to be attending Furin as well. But Naraya takes offense to this and says he's never seen Sakura around, so he must be from out of town. Which is true, but it's not like it matters where he came from. Another thing Naraya scrutinizes is the way Sakura's hair and eyes look, but while Sakura was expecting him to call him disgusting or something, he actually just thinks his hair is turning white because of stress. Tachibana finds the whole thing funny, so she acts as the mediator and introduces both of them. She explains that Sakura just moved into town yesterday, but Mirai still has no idea who Sakura is supposed to be, so he takes a look in his top secret book of names, and according to it, Sakura is a complete nobody. Sakura was about ready to throw hands at this point, but Tachibana tells him that Naraya doesn't mean any harm, he just acts like that sometimes. Naraya goes on to warn Sakura that Furin is an ordinary school to be taken lightly. The students here stood up for the locals and drive away wicked troublemakers, so all the new students to the people look up to them. With that being said, it makes no sense to him why Sakura, who has no ties to this town whatsoever, would want to come to school here. Sakura answers that he's here to take the top spot at Furin Academy. He thinks it's cool that they are protecting the town, and he knows there are a bunch of strong guys there as well, so he would be satisfied if he knew he was the strongest among them. Mirai thinks he shouldn't set goals for himself that he won't be able to achieve, because if he does, then the stress will make him go bald. Sakura has had enough of Mirai's antics, so he tells him to get ready because they're about to throw hands. Naraya doesn't like the sound of that, so he makes an excuse about it being late, so he has to leave now. Later, as Sakura leaves, he is pondering what Tachibana had told him when his path gets blocked by a surprise tray of baked goods. The baker offers them to him for free, but Sakura is confused as to why he is getting such an offer for no reason. They say it's their way of giving back to the Furin kids since they are always so helpful, and they want Sakura to have the bread because he was single-handedly holding off the troublemakers the day before, so it's the least they could do. Sakura once again can't handle being thanked for anything, so he tries to decline by saying he's not hungry, but the bakers are insistent and give him the bread anyway so he can eat it for lunch today. And they weren't the only ones to offer Sakura free stuff. After all the thanks the townspeople gave him, it looks like Sakura just did a week worth of shopping. It still isn't clicking in Sakura's brain that some people are just nice when you help them out, so he thinks this town must really be messed up. But then again, maybe he was just assuming that they would never treat him like a member of the community. He thinks about it for a moment, but then he gets startled by a girl calling out to him from behind because she needs his help. In a dark alleyway, we see Naraya getting the shit kicked out of him by a group of hoodlums, and they say it's because Naraya interrupted them while they were trying to raise up that girl that we saw ask Sakura for help. The situation is pretty similar to what happened with Sakura the day before, but the only difference is that Naraya interfered knowing damn well that he can't handle a one-on-one, let alone a 1-5 fight. The leader of the guys calls Naraya pathetic for losing a fight so easily, but he's going to leave now since there's nothing more for him to gain by being here. But Naraya won't let him go for some reason and grabs into his shirt. The guy thinks this is just sad now since Naraya has no shot at taking him down. But if he keeps being annoying like this, he's going to have to take this fight seriously and beat Naraya to a pulp. Naraya refuses to give up and begins reciting the Furin school motto to purge all evil as if he thinks it will give him a power-up. But we all know power-ups only come from flashbacks if the bully is about to knock him out so he can't pester them anymore. However, before the hammer fist comes down on Naraya's head, he is saved by Sakura, who comes flying in with a kick to the face. Narei doesn't understand why Sakura would come here to save him despite them barely knowing each other. But Sakura isn't here because he wants to save him, he just really hates people who enjoy picking on the weak in large groups, so he's going to take care of them. Narei tries to warn him not to get involved since he can't possibly take on 5 guys at once, but moments later the 5 guys are all laid out on the ground and Sakura is still standing. Narei is amazed by the strength Sakura possesses and thanks him for saving him just now, but he apologizes because Sakura must be disappointed in him. Sakura has no real feelings on the matter, but he tells Narei to know what he is capable of handling before he gets himself into fights out of nowhere. Narei gives his backstory of how he used to get bullied a lot in middle school, but then one day he was saved by someone from Furin. Normally, he would only ever be afraid of someone like that, but in that moment, he thought the guy looked really cool. He wanted to be just like that guy, which is why he came to Furin, but he is still such a loser. Sakura thinks about it for a moment and realizes that he may have judged Narei a little too harshly at first. He may not be much of a fighter, but he still had the guts to help someone in trouble and not back away from a fight. At least in Sakura's books, that makes him a decent guy. The girl from earlier comes running over to see if Narei is alright, and since he doesn't want to be seen crying, he says he is alright. The girl is thankful to him for stepping in to save her when those guys started hassling her, and Sakura as well for helping save Narei when she asked. Once more, Sakura is embarrassed by being thanked, so he tries to leave, but Narei calls out to him and pulls out his top-secret book so he can start recording everything there is to know about Sakura. From his height to the type of girl he likes. Sakura doesn't appreciate getting his info documented like this, so he smacks Narei on the head, but Narei says he was just doing it because he enjoys gathering the data of people he looks up to. And that gets Sakura to let him hang around since he's not that bad. Narei may not be of much use in a fight, but he is sure he can help show Sakura around town since he is new here. But for now, they have to head to school since the entrance ceremony will be starting soon. After that, he and Narei finally arrive at the school, and Narei is pumped to check out the class rosters to see which class he'll be in. Luckily, he and Sakura are in the same class, as well as a bunch of other people he looks up to, but has never actually spoken to. Sakura tells him to stop geeking out over who's going to be in the same class as him because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. But after Narei takes another look at the class rosters, he sees something that wipes the color off his face. As they walk up the stairs to class, Narei pleads with Sakura to try to be friendly with the people in class so he doesn't cause any problems, but there's no way he's going to pander to anyone for no reason. Narei just wants him to show everyone that he means no harm since he comes from out of town and may not be accepted right away. But Sakura is already warming up for a fight, exactly what Narei does not want him to do. One wrong move and the whole class may see him as an enemy of Furin, at which point the entire school will turn against him. But Sakura doesn't see a problem with that since he came here to get to the top of the school, so it wouldn't matter to him if everyone came at him at once. Upon entering the class, there's a whole spectrum of students, including the one in the back who's just doing pull-ups. Everyone starts staring daggers at Sakura, and he's liking the way things are going since the class looks like they mean actual business. He gets approached by one eye patch-wearing dude, and he seems to be pretty nice. This is Shuo, and he's inside Narei's top-secret book, so you know he's got to be cool. However, the eye patch is just for show though. But that's enough discussion about himself, so if he wants to hear about Sakura. Sakura was ready to start fighting immediately, but he is surprised when Sue just patting him on the back and telling him he did a good job defending the town yesterday. Seeing Sue being friendly with Sakura, all the others in class become interested in him and ask what he did. Sue explains that he was the one who single-handedly held off that gang that attacked the town, so they all have a good amount of respect for him immediately, and Narei is glad because this means Sakura won't have a target on his back. However, when he's asked why he came here, Sakura answers honestly and says he came to get the top spot at the school, and after saying that he now has the attention of all the heavy hitters in class. Most notably Sugita, who chucks a desk out of nowhere and threatens to crush Sakura, but Sakura was already looking for a fight, so this works out well for him. Sagashita is well known in this school and has been visiting long before he officially joined. His talents were recognized, so he was allowed to be called a member even while he was still only in middle school. And right now, the reason he is going after Sakura is because he has somewhat of an obsession with the person in the current #1 spot. So whenever anyone says they want to challenge that guy, Sagashita goes apeshit crazy. One of the students pleads with Sue to stop Sagashita before he kills the new guy, but Sue didn't come to school today to put himself within punching range for no reason. As Sakura is still fighting, he accidentally slips on some white liquid on the floor, so Sabeshita tries to take full advantage of the blunder and wins up a haymaker. However, his punch catches nothing but air as Sakura has already recovered and leans back into a backflip kick across Sabeshita's face. It looks like Sakura is really enjoying the fight, but if Sabeshita is really just acting out of loyalty to someone else, then Sakura doesn't believe he will ever be able to beat him. The fight was just about to continue, but then the speaker went off and a voice addresses all the new Furin students rather loudly. Sakura finds it annoying that a perfectly good fight got interrupted, so he wants to keep it going. However, everyone in the class seems to have their attention glued to the speaker, and Sakura finds out why in a moment. The person introduces himself as Hajime Umemiya, the current top dog of Furin Academy, so Sakura is excited that he finally gets to hear from him. However, Umemiya seems to be a lot more clumsy with his words than Sakura expected because he flat out forgets the whole speech he was meant to give. Instead, he just goes on a tangent about how it would be nice to go to the beach and eat some shaved ice, and despite how awkward it is to listen to this, no one can say anything about it because they'll have to deal with Sabeshita. That aside, Umemiya goes on to say he wants everyone to get along, but he knows there are bound to be disagreements between students at some point, so he won't ask that they all become best friends. But surely no one would be dumb enough to start a fight on the first day of school, and suddenly Sabeshita regrets throwing that desk a whole lot. Before he ends his public address, Umemiya has one last thing he wants to say to all the students, even though they probably already know. It is their job to protect the town. The people there trust them to be their shield, so they must live up to their expectations and guard them with everything they have. Sakura is surprised that someone could command so much respect without even being in the room to begin with. He finds it hard to believe that Umemiya was able to foster this kind of solidarity among the students here simply by being a strong fighter, making him even more curious to find out what kind of guy Umemiya really is. Now that the fighting has stopped, Sue slides in and asks if Sakura and Sabeshita are ready to make up yet, but Sakura sees no reason why he should forgive Sabeshita since they haven't settled the score yet, plus Sabeshita was the one who attacked him first to begin with. To mediate, Shuo makes valid arguments that Sakura shouldn't go around holding grudges if he actually wants to make it to the top, and Sabeshita shouldn't have gone and started a fight out of nowhere when he knows Umemiya would not have liked that. So after listening to Suo's logic, Sabeshita stretches his hand out to Sakura for a handshake, and Sakura does the same. Although, that doesn't mean they are friends all of a sudden. As soon as the handshake is done, Sakura gets swarmed by his new classmates, who all want to congratulate him on how amazing he was for being able to land a solid hit on Sabeshita. As Sakura was messing around with his classmates, a guy suddenly bursts in and tells everyone that it's time to head out. Sakura doesn't know what he means by that, and he is even more confused when he ends up having to paint a wall. 30 minutes earlier, after that guy called them all out to the courtyard, Sakura was pissed that he had to leave the classroom right after he got there, but the guy doesn't want to hear it since if they end up being late, then he is going to get yelled at as well. They look over to the edge of the courtyard and spot Haraji yelling at a bunch of students for taking too long to get down here. Sakura recognizes him from the fight yesterday, and Mirai is shocked he actually knows Haraji, so Sakura explains that he has met him when he saved Kotoha from that gang. But as soon as Haraji hears this, he comes racing over and grabs Sakura's face, driving him away to talk in private. Haraji doesn't want Sakura telling anyone that Kotoha was in danger here today, because if Umemiya finds out that Kotoha was in danger, there's going to be hell to pay. And as he says this, he reaches into his jacket pocket, which puts Sakura on edge, but he was just pulling out stomach medicine because he can't handle all the stress dealing with Umemiya causes. Haraji walks away after that, leaving Sakura incredibly confused, and as soon as he returns to Mirai, he is bombarded by questions about what Haraji is like. The only thing Sakura can say about him is that he is pretty weird, which Mirai immediately jots down in his top secret book. Sakura doesn't understand why he cares so much about getting info on Haraji, so Mirai explains that Haraji is one of the 4 Heavenly Kings of Furin Academy under Umemiya, and each Heavenly King has their appointed captains for each class. After explaining how they will be grouped up, Haraji tells them that they are moving out so they should follow him. Sakura still doesn't know what they are even meant to be doing, so he is finally informed that they are going on patrol. Sakura doesn't really have a problem with going on patrol, but he does have a problem with having to do it with Sabeshita. Haraji didn't really want to have to deal with them, but Umemiya asked that he keep an eye on them so they don't start fighting again. Sakura complains that he wasn't the one who started the fight, but Haraji doesn't care at all. After Sakura has calmed down, he asks why they say they are on patrol when this seems a lot like they are just strolling through town. If they are meant to be protecting the town, then Sakura thinks it would be more efficient to go around and look for people who are causing trouble so they can beat them up. Hiraji calls Sakura an idiot for thinking something like that would be effective at reducing crime because that's just raiding. And walking around has its purpose because people knowing that the Furin students are around will keep the smaller groups of troublemakers away. Just then, Hiraji notices an old lady climbing on a rickety old ladder, so he steps in to keep her from breaking her hip, and all of a sudden, the entire group is helping repaint the storefront. Sakura doesn't understand how he ended up doing this, but it's all part of being a member of Furin. Once they are all done painting the walls, they receive many thanks, as well as some delicious snacks for the road. As they leave, Hiraji addresses what Sakura has said earlier about thinking what they were doing is boring, and Hiraji can understand why he thinks that way since he was the same before, but now he has come to learn that being needed can be pretty fun as well. After walking for a while, they end up in an alleyway which gives off a different vibe. It has a dog drawn over it, which Sakura thinks is ugly, but Mirai cautions him not to say things like that so close to the border because they don't know where those guys may be hanging around. This is the territorial border between Bafurin and another group, so they can't cause trouble on the other side of that overpass. Over there, Bafurin's rules mean nothing because they have no jurisdiction. The group is called Shishitoran, and they believe only in absolute power. Mirai said all this with the intent of stopping Sakura from causing trouble, but he only managed to get him more interested. Just then, they notice one of the Furin students being chased down by a couple of people from Shishitoran, but he's on their side of the track, so Hiraji can't get involved. The guy was about to get caught before he could cross back over to Furin territory, but Sakura and Sugishita don't really care about rules, so they both jump in and knock out one of the Shishitoran people. Naraya thinks this is going to cause trouble since they struck Shishitoran students on their turf, but Sakura believes it's only fair that they fight back since Shishitoran clearly attacked one of their own first. However, even though Sakura and Sugishita just laid out one of their people, the others there don't seem to care about what happened to him in the slightest and start shitting on him for losing a fight after just one kick. Just then, someone approaches from behind, and the two Sugishita students immediately have shivers sent down their spines because they know exactly who this is: Joe Togame. He is the second in command at Shishitoran, and he came over here because he heard a commotion, but he is surprised to see one of his people knocked out on the ground, so Hiraji steps up and informs him that the unconscious guy was chasing after one of Furin's people, so they stepped in and stopped what was going on. Once Togame grasps that what happened here was the work of Sugishita and Sakura, his reaction gets Sakura excited since he believes he might get a good fight from this guy, but soon after, the unconscious guy wakes up and begins yelling at Sakura for breaking the rules and interfering in the business of the Shishitoran group. However, as he was going on with his rant, Togame clocks him over the head with a bottle, making him go unconscious again. If there's one thing Togame hates, it's weak losers, and especially those who try to hide behind rules and order, so he starts beating the guy up because he doesn't belong in Shishitoran anymore. It gets so bad that Hiraji has to stop Togame and ask if he is really on the same team as the guy he is beating up. Togame pauses the beating for a second just to say that the guy isn't his teammate anymore. He just lost a ranked match and got demoted to Silver 2, so he is no longer welcome as a member of Shishitoran, which is why Togame is revoking his cool jacket. After listening to everything Togame has to say, Sakura has heard enough and now thinks he is really lame. He beats up the weak so he can call himself strong, so Togame is a huge letdown. Everyone thinks a fight is about to break out, but while Togame is definitely pissed off, he decides that he'll beat Sakura up on a better stage, so he's going to leave for now, but he'll be sure to remember his face. After that is over, Narai starts screaming because Sakura and Sugishita may have just done something that will lead to an all-out war against the Shishitoran people. And if Sakura hadn't provoked him at the end, he may have been a little more forgiving of the attack they did. Hiraji doesn't think that could have happened because Togame isn't as easygoing as he may appear. Among the Shishitoran, he is easily the most territorial, so there's no way he would ever forgive an incident like this. Regardless, Hiraji admits that he should have been the one to step in and save the kid, so he apologizes for not doing anything when it counted. For now, they should all head back to the school so they can report to Yumemiya. Hiraji is dreading having to give the report, which gets Sakura further intrigued to find out what kind of guy Yumemiya actually is. But once they finally get to the roof and meet him, he seems like a really nice guy. Hiraji approaches him and says they've got a problem on their hands, but he says he already knows all about it. That makes no sense since nobody could have told him about what happened yet, but it turns out that he's just talking about his plants. The others are starting to understand why Hiraji hates having to report to Yumemiya now, and it's because he never listens to anything you tell him. Sakura tries to get his attention, but Sagashita gets angry that he would dare try to communicate with his idol, so he was ready to start fighting again, until he remembered Yumemiya is right here and wouldn't approve. They all end up sitting down while Yumemiya explains all the plants he has been growing, when they really should be talking about the real issue here. Sakura can't even tell the difference between the plants anyway, and while he's definitely a good guy, Sakura is more confused than ever about why so many people respect Yumemiya so much. After a while of listening to his plant lecture, the kid who got beat up speaks up and starts explaining what happened today. He says he saw a shoplifter stealing in town, so he chased after the guide, but before he knew it, he had gone too far and ended up in the Lion's Head territory. They were chasing him down and there was no way he could have ever managed to outrun them, but just as he was about to give up, he was saved by Sakura and Sagashita. He admired the Furin students so much that he tried to be like them, but he only ended up sparking a clash with the Lion's Head and getting everyone involved, and for that, he is truly sorry. Yumemiya calls Sasaki by name and tells him thank you for doing what you did. Sure, he may have inadvertently caused a war, but he did it while trying to protect the people of this town, so he has nothing to be sorry for. As for the war, he doesn't have to worry about it since Yumemiya says he will personally handle it. But that aside, he really wants to know how Sakura and Sagashita saved him, so Sasaki explains that they kicked one of the guys off his feet. Yumemiya knows the Lion's Head people won't like that one bit, but he's got to admit that finds it pretty funny. Hiraji apologizes since all this happened while he was meant to be looking after them, but Yumemiya doesn't blame him for it since mistakes happen all the time and Narai rats Sakura out for making things worse by taunting Togame. So Sakura explains that he couldn't stand the fact that Togame was talking about strength being the only thing that was important while only beating him on the weak, so he said it to his face. Yumemiya understands what happened, so he gets up and Sakura thinks he wants to fight, but he actually just gives him a pat on the head and says he was thinking the same thing since those guys have a terrible mindset. On another note, he heard about what Sakura did on Main Street yesterday and today he saved Sasaki, so Yumemiya thanks him for looking out for the people here. Sagashita is jealous that Sakura is getting so much attention and Sakura feels a strange feeling of relaxation from around him. He is starting to understand why people are drawn to him all the time, and that's because he has a presence that would make anyone feel safe. However, Sakura won't let himself give in to that warmth, so he slaps Yumemiya's hand away. Just then, Hiraji gets a call from Kaji, but the only words he can hear him say over the phone are the words Lion's Head before he gets cut off on the phone. Yumemiya asks if something is wrong, but then a moment later they hear someone talking on a megaphone. So they all look down to the courtyard and see a guy dragging the unconscious body of one of the students here. He says he is the leader of Shishitorin, otherwise known as Lion's Head, and his name is Tomiyama Choji. The reason he has come here today and beaten up so many Furin students is because he wants to have a good and clean fight with Yumemiya, and his smile shows just how excited he is for it. Narei is freaking out over the fact that the leader of Lion's Head is here in person, while Sakura is just getting excited because he knows Tomiyama must be stronger than Togame. In that same moment, Sakura feels an unbelievable presence behind him, and he can't tell what it was, so as he sees Yumemiya leaving, he starts following him. The others do the same, and once they are all outside, Yumemiya tells them to stay out of this one. Sakura, as usual, insists on wanting to fight, but Yumemiya just coldly warns him that he doesn't repeat orders twice. Sakura is instantly hit with a sudden wave of obedience because he knows he would have caught a straight punch if he talked back just now, but he has no idea how Yumemiya's entire demeanor could have changed so suddenly. He approaches Tomiyama and calls him out for still holding one of the Furin students by the hair, but Tomiyama simply acknowledges it and laughs straight in Yumemiya's face about what he did. Sakura thinks this guy must be insanely strong, or at least just insane to have the guts to mock Yumemiya to his face like this, and all he really wants right now is to face Yumemiya in a 1 versus 1 since he's got a good excuse for it after what Sakura and Sagashita did. Yumemiya just stands still while Tomiyama circles him, still asking for a fight, but then he speaks up and says that while it may be true that Furin made the first move by knocking out that guy under the bridge, but clearly Tomiyama has done much worse in retaliation, so he thinks they can call it even now. Tomiyama agrees that what he has done is enough to at least call it even for now, but that doesn't mean things have been settled as he throws a kick at Yumemiya's face. Yumemiya caught it, but Tomiyama wasn't actually going for a sneak attack, he just wanted to start another conflict if he has a reason to fight Yumemiya. It doesn't make any sense why he wants to fight so badly, so Yumemiya asks what his goal is in doing all this. Tomiyama answers that it's not necessarily because he wants to fight, but rather he wants Yumemiya. Over at Lion's Head, it has been really lonely for him, ever since he became the top dog, but Yumemiya, on the other hand, has no shortage of friends to have fun with, so Tomiyama came up with a rational solution to come here and take over all of Furin so he can have fun too. Yumemiya can sympathize Tomiyama's point of view, but before he could even attempt to talk things out with him, some other members of Lion's Head show up, and while Tomiyama is confused why they are here since he didn't call for backup, they tell him that it was a bad idea to go assaulting Furin High on his own like this. Sakura and the others walk forward to join Yumemiya, and even though he tries to get them to back off again, Sakura stands his ground because while he can respect a duel, he won't stand for a jumping. Tomiyama is getting frustrated since he was just about to get a proper duel with Yumemiya, so he wants everyone else to leave already. But Togame doesn't think a duel is really going to work out today, especially when they've got the entire student body staring them down at the moment. Yumemiya sees what's about to happen, so he yells for everyone in the classes to stay where they are as he steps forward, saying he will take Tomiyama on in a duel like he wanted. He just wants him to tell the others to stand down so things don't get messy. Tomiyama is glad to finally get his match, but then one of the Lion's Head kids begins mocking Yumemiya for being such a softie, and this sets off Sagasha, who can't stand any Yumemiya slander. Another one tries mocking Suo for looking so plain that he needs to wear accessories to stand out, but with how he's holding his hands in the anime girl pose, Suo just thinks he is cute. Togame says everyone should calm down for a bit, and then he tells Tomiyama that even if he wants to have a duel, he should save it for another day since it's already getting dark. And if they start fighting in the dark, they won't be able to admire how badly they beat down the Furin students. Sakura retorts, saying the only one getting their faces smashed in is gonna be Togame, and since Tomiyama can see that there is clearly some tension between these two, he suggests that they make the duel a team match instead. They can have a bunch of one-on-one battles, and the combatants are going to be Yumemiya and Tomiyama, Togame and Sakura, Sagasha and this guy, and finally, Suo and the kawaii boy. Yumemiya protests, saying that if it's a duel he wants, and the two of them should be enough. But Tomiyama now wants it to be a tournament because that sounds like way more fun to him. Sakura and the others agree to the terms of the tournament, but at the last moment, one more guy from Lion's Head comes out and asks to join in because he wants to take on Haraji, and Haraji seems to have some beef with him. So he accepts the challenge and joins the tournament as well. Since everything has been settled, Tomiyama says he will be putting the Lion's Head team on the line for this, so everyone should do their best and have fun. Later, the guys head over to the cafe to get some food and relax, and Mirai is freaking out because he thinks the situation is really, really bad for them. Sakura is getting tired of all of Mirai's complaining, but he is the reason all this started in the first place. Kotoha brings over some food and tells Mirai that there's no point in getting so stressed about it all since it won't change what happens, but Mirai has good reason to be worried, since if by some horrible turn of events, Yumemiya were to actually lose, then Boffurin may cease to exist altogether. Konoha still maintains her point that worrying about things won't change anything either way, but you should know better than anyone that these guys aren't so weak that they would lose to Lion's Head so easily. Sakura scarfs down his food insanely fast, and once he is done eating, he asks if he can leave for the day. Mirai is shocked that he finished so fast, but they are meant to be waiting for Yumemiya and Haraji to show up since they had to stay back and convince the rest of the Furin students not to do anything that would complicate matters further. Sakura understands that, but he doesn't know why they have to meet up here of all places, so Suo explains that this is somewhat of a hangout spot for Furin, and they usually gather here before big fights happen. Just then, Yumemiya comes bursting through the door and immediately begins fawning over Kotoha. Sakura thinks this must mean that she is Yumemiya's girlfriend, but they both immediately deny that. Yumemiya instead asserts that Kotoha is his darling little sister, but Kotoha denies this as well, leaving Sakura confused about what their actual relationship is. Kotoha is embarrassed to say this, but she explains that both she and Yumemiya were raised in the same orphanage, and Yumemiya just one-sidedly decided that she was his little sister at one point. Sakura doesn't find the situation all that weird, but he is a little shocked to find out that she is the little sister here. She says she is only 16, but he was sure that she was at least 20 or something since she acts so mature. But as he says this, he gets a chair thrown at him by Sagasha, which gets on his nerves, but what really scares him is the way Yumemiya is looking at him like he was just about to do a lot worse to Sakura. He laughs it off, and Hiraji reminds Sakura that he must never let Yumemiya know that Kotoha was ever in danger or hell's going to break loose. A little while later, Yumemiya is enjoying his meal, but Hiraji seems to be lost in thought about something. He has been thinking about the former top dog of Lion's Head, and that gets Sakura wondering if Lion's Head used to be different from how it is now. They believe in strength alone, and they certainly had a bunch of hotheads on their team, but they would have never done something as cowardly as chasing a middle schooler to beat him up. Fury even had an all-out brawl with Lion's Head once, but it was oddly satisfying for everyone involved. However, since Tomiyama took over, things have gone downhill with him picking fights all over the place, and they've never been the same since then. Yumemiya thinks it has to be Tomiyama's fault, although he's not sure about the specifics, but if they fight tomorrow, then they'll be able to find out since punches are sometimes the only way guys like them can communicate. Closing time rolls around, so Kotoha closes up shop and everyone is about to head home, but before they leave, Sasaki takes a moment to formally thank Sakura for stepping up to save him when he was in trouble, to which Sakura gets embarrassed again. By the next morning, they all arrive at the bridge and head into the Lion's Head territory for the tournament, and Tomiyama and the other Lion's Head members were all waiting to get things started. Since all the participants are here, Tomiyama excitedly tells them to follow him so that they can get things started. As Sakura and the others walk along the streets, he notices that Lion's Head's turf is made up almost exclusively of bars, so Mirai explains that this place is the biggest bar district in the area, and it is said to be really lively at night, but also pretty seedy. That information was useful and all, but now that Sakura thinks about it, why is Mirai here in the first place? He can't fight, so he has no reason to follow them to the tournament. Mirai argues that he was present during the initial brawl that started this whole thing, so he is just as much involved as they are. And besides, he is still a member of Baffurin, so even if he can't protect others like they do, he wants to at least be able to protect himself. So to do that, he wants to learn as much as possible from them. Sakura blushes a little and says Mirai can do whatever he wants, but Hiraji thinks they are taking this tournament not seriously enough considering it will decide the fate of Baffurin as a whole, but Yumemiya doesn't think it's worth worrying about because from what he can tell, they are pretty dependable. Since they were falling behind, Tomiyama comes back to tell them to keep up with the group. Eventually, they all arrive at their destination, so Togame officially welcomes them to the Lion's Head base. This place is an old abandoned movie theater that Lion's Head took over, so they now call it the Cage. And once the Furin guys make it to the stage room, they find themselves completely surrounded by an audience of Lion's Head members, and Mirai is starting to regret his decision to follow the others here, because the odds of them getting jumped just flew through the roof. Sakura tells Mirai not to show any signs of fear and look forward since he said he wants to learn. Meanwhile, Tomiyama steps out in front of the crowd and starts getting them hyped up about the duels that are set to begin soon. And while he does that, Yumemiya talks to the guys and tells them that this may have turned into a whole tournament, but the main event is still going to be the fight between Yumemiya and Tomiyama, so the rest of their fights won't have much of an effect on the bet that was made, meaning it doesn't matter if they win or lose. However, it matters a lot to Sakura since he doesn't plan on losing to anyone here, and neither do the rest of them. Yumemiya is glad to have such dependable friends to support him, but as he turns to face the stage, Tomiyama is calling out to him so they can start fighting immediately. However, Togame interrupts and says they can't start the tournament with the bosses of each group since that is just poor entertainment planning. So instead, this guy asks if he can go first since Sagisha has been staring at him with rage in his eyes for a while now, and it's starting to really piss him off. On Sagisha's end, Yumemiya tells him that he's fine with him fighting in the first rounds, so he turns around to follow the guy onto the stage. But before he walks out, Sakura gets his attention and tells him that they still got their own score to settle with a rematch. But Sakura would never want to fight someone who would lose to these losers, so basically he is telling Sagisha to try his best to win. Sagisha doesn't respond and just turns away instead without saying a word. The fight is finally about to begin with Sagisha and Arima facing each other head to head. Meanwhile, in the audience, Mirai is going through his book of fighters and he finds a record of Arima once having broken several ribs of a guy he was fighting, all with a single punch. That punch must have had some insane power behind it, but Sue doesn't seem worried since Sagisha is pretty similar in terms of capabilities. However, Yumemiya doesn't think it's fair to lump Sagisha and Arima together since they are nothing alike. On stage, Arima can tell that Sagisha is filled with rage and just waiting for the match to start, so he decides to use that to his advantage and looks over to Yumemiya, before yelling his name out as if something is wrong. Due to Sagisha's Yumemiya fixation, he was obligated to look to make sure his idol was okay. But as soon as gaze was averted, Arima immediately ran forward and punched him square in the face while mocking him for being dumb enough to look away during a fight. However, Sagisha is still standing after taking a straight punch while he was off guard, so Sakura and Yumemiya aren't really worried about the fight. Arima still seems to think he is on the winning side of this fight, but once Sagisha grabs his arm, I'm sure Arima started regretting his prior decision a lot. Sagisha is enraged that Arima would dare use Yumemiya's name as part of such a dirty trick, so he palms Arima's face and slams his body into the floor so hard that he now identifies as a floorboard. The crowd has gone silent as they just witnessed one of their own get completely violated, so they all start chattering amongst themselves because they know they ain't built strong enough to take a hit like that. There's a serious mood in the theater, but the silence is broken up when Tomiyama begins to clap for Sagisha's flawless victory. Togame has a cold and calculating look on his face, which is heavily contrasted by Tomiyama's excitement to get a chance to fight someone as strong as that. He pulls Tomiyama back into his seat and tells him to just behave himself and wait for his turn. Mirai can't believe how little concern Tomiyama and Togame are showing for Arima after he just got beaten, and they are even praising his opponent for being strong on top of that, so he knows these guys have a few screws loose in the head. Sagisha returns to his seat and is welcomed back by Yumemiya, who congratulates him on his overwhelming victory, but it's not like he expected any other outcome from someone as sturdy as him. Narai is still in awe of the durability Sagisha has to be able to tank a punch like that and keep going, but Sakura isn't surprised since he already expected as much since he has fought Sagisha before. But it's not like he respects him as a fighter or anything. Yumemiya is glad things are going well, but then he looks over at Togame and Tomiyama, and Togame seems like he's thinking hard about something. After a moment, both he and Tomiyama get up so they can start the next round, but before any of that can happen, Tomiyama calls over two random guys from the audience and tells them to go dispose of Arima's body so he doesn't have to look at it anymore. They do as they are instructed and drag his body off stage, but they give up on carrying him backstage, so they just drop his body on the floor since they can't be bothered to be nice to him. He always acted like he was really tough around them, but now look at him, laid out on the floor and looking goofy. After kicking him in the face, they start walking off, but Sakura can't stand the sound of them talking about strength, so he tells them to keep their mouths shut until they can understand what real strength is. The two guys take offense to this and start picking a fight with Sakura, but Sue tells him there's no point in wasting his breath talking with them because those kinds of people will never understand unless they get a good punch to the face. One of the guys then grabs Sue's jacket and is about to fight him, but Tomiyama organized a set of predetermined fights for today, and he's not going to let some nameless background character ruin that for him, so he tells the guy to back off. They are stricken with fear, so they do as he says, and now that order has been restored, Tomiyama asks for the next battle to begin. Sakura wants to go next, but Sue tells him that it would make more sense for him to go next with the current order of things, so he calls over to Kanuma so they can begin their fight. As Kanuma walks towards the stage, Sue gets up to go as well, but before he leaves, he addresses Sakura and tells him that he thought Sakura's goal of becoming the top dog at Furin was stupid when he first heard it. Sakura thinks he's trying to start a fight with him, but Sue goes on to state that he has changed his mind after he saw that Sakura's words had genuine motivation behind them, so now he thinks Sakura is pretty cool. That's why he is going to work hard so Sakura doesn't surpass him so easily. As the fight is about to begin, Sakura asks Narai if he has any information on Suo, so Narai looks in his book. But while it says he is famously strong, there isn't any specific data on how he became so strong or who he has beaten before. It's the same with everyone else too, as they've heard a lot of talk about Suo, but they don't actually know how he fights. Kanuma is biting his fingernails in anger over what the Furin students have done to Arima, and Suo is surprised that he can actually feel compassion for another person, but he is only angry about what happened to Arima because they've been together for a long time, but now that he has been eliminated, his career in Lion's Head is ruined. Suo finds it childish to only make a fuss for someone else's sake when you are personally affected. His taunting gets to Kanuma, so he charges at him, but Suo calmly grabs his hand and parries his punch with ease. Kanuma is confused about what just happened since he can tell that Suo's movements just now were completely reactive, so he comes up with a bright idea to just punch faster so that Suo can't react in time to dodge. However, that doesn't go so well for him, and he ends up on his back looking goofy in front of everyone. He tries to regain some of his dignity and grabs Suo's leg for another attack, but he just gets himself thrown to the floor once more. The embarrassment is getting worse and worse as Suo is now lecturing him while he's on the floor, so he tries attacking again. But as expected, Suo uses his momentum against him once more and makes him hit the ground. The Lion's Head crowd begins yelling obscenities at Kanuma because they think he isn't taking this fight seriously, but he is actually trying as hard as he can right now. Sakura realizes that under that fake smile, Suo is actually pretty heartless when he wants to be. He already knew Kanuma was weaker than him, but rather than take him out quickly and let it be done with, is making a mockery of him. Kanuma probably feels like he would rather be dead than keep fighting Suo like this, but Suo probably had his own grudges against Lion's Head, so this is his way of taking out his anger on them, although Hiraji never expected him to be so emotional about it. But then again, he could just be showing him off because Sakura is watching. Over on stage, Kanuma just missed a punch that had him stumbling across the entire stage, but after catching his breath, he goes back in for another attack, only to miss more of his punches and get pushed back. He tries kicking Suo, but that just gets him a first-class ticket back to the floor. He gets points for resilience since he keeps fighting, but with how much he has been kissing the floor this entire fight, he may want to consider just staying down. The Lion's Head people have now completely turned on Kanuma, and he knows what's going to happen to him if they view him as weak, and after seeing the look of disappointment on Togame's face, he throws a tantrum and gets back up to try and attack Suo. However, that doesn't work out in his favor as Suo throws a kick but stops inches away from his face. He then tells Kanuma that he knows exactly what he is thinking about right now. He is imagining himself in the exact same position as the people he had made fun of, and he probably doesn't like it. Suo tells him that this is a first great step towards his reform as a compassionate person, but the next step is to beat it into him so he doesn't forget what it feels like to be a loser. But before Suo can do that, Togame tells him to stop since the fight is already over, and he doesn't want Kanuma disgracing them any further. In fact, to make sure they don't have to deal with his dumbass anymore, Togame officially kicks him out of the Lion's Head, so he has lost everything in one fight. Suo is satisfied with what he has done to Kanuma, so he walks off stage, leaving him with a reminder of how important it is to be compassionate towards others. This was the end of episode 5. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to not miss the next part.